wouldn't wish it upon anyone to do the job that I do. It can be very difficult. Things can break and crises can happen, and that can happen with any company. But when it happens to us, we're not just talking about an email browser not working or like a project management software not loading. We're talking about a person who's just gone through the most traumatic moment of their life, not being able to access resources. So I think the stakes are a lot higher. And I think
Wow.
I didn't realize that when I first started the company is how high the stakes are.
Welcome to 20-Minute Leaders. Just sit back, relax, and learn from the leaders of today. It's a journey. Each one is different, unique, inspiring. Let's get started. This episode is powered by J Ventures, a community-driven VC fund in Silicon Valley, in partnership with Leumi Tech, sponsored by Hippo Insurance, Upwest Labs, Turing, Hillel at Stanford, Leap, and in media partnership with CTech. Welcome to 20-Minute Leaders. Today we're going to be meeting an entrepreneur that is channeling her own personal traumatic experience into a company that is going to help a lot of people. Meet Madison Campbell, the CEO of Leda Health. Madison is a trailblazer and sexual assault advocate. After going to college to study epidemiology in space populations, Madison has become a well-seasoned entrepreneur. She led a company prior to Leda Health called Iyanu, which was a software development shop based in Lagos, Nigeria. Today, she's working hard to promote the autonomy and self-actualization of the sexual assault survivors through Leda Health by developing and providing resources to help them overcome their difficult trauma. Madison Campbell, welcome to 20-Minute Leaders. How are you?
I'm doing amazing. I mean, as amazing as I possibly could on a Monday. But thank you so much for having me.
No. Thank you for coming here. Right before we started this recording, I mentioned to you that, one of my goals through the show is to understand better why people are doing what they're doing and with what conviction do they come into the companies they're building. And obviously here, it's going to be, I think, a really inspiring way for me to understand better the conviction that people are coming with. You're a young sexual assault advocate and survivor, and today you're running Leda Health, previously the Me Too Kits, but also I'm curious to hear both, your personal journey, but also understand better, the gaps in what's happening today. We're in 2021. We seem to be resolving a lot of the issues that we've been seeing over the last hundreds of years. But I think that you're describing here an issue that has been unspoken about for a long, long time. And I'm excited to learn more about it from you. So Madison, tell me a little bit about your own journey and how Leda Health came about.
Yeah. So, I think there's a lot of founding journeys. And, for me, mine started in a very highly personal space of actually experiencing trauma myself. And I believe that a lot of our, other folks in our company have experienced trauma, whether it is sexual trauma or other trauma. I think everyone experiences trauma in their life. And I think everyone kind of has a decision that they can make, which is, am I going to take this trauma and is it going to impact me and I'm not going to be able to move forward with it? Or am I going to be able to take it in and create something better because of it? And so with that being said, I decided to take my trauma and turn it into a company, which is one way of, dealing with it. Probably a better way would have been therapy. But I decided to, build a company around that and, really examine the issue of sexual assault. To start off with, because it is something that is highly personable to me. But, in examining sexual assault, I think where I've really come and what I've really been looking at is just the problems plaguing, young folks, right? College age folks. And sexual assault, unfortunately, is, a humongous problem that I don't believe we've tackled quite yet. But, that doesn't mean that we can't eventually expand into other problems, which are very, very difficult to tackle and that are sometimes very scary to talk about.
Right. And so what do we know, in at least or in the United States or the world, what do we know about sexual assault today? Thinking about the problem space, as a market, it's obviously not a market, but thinking about it,
it is a market, right?
What is going on?
I mean, you can actually, it's totally fine to say it's a market, right? Because when 1 in 4 women will be sexually assaulted during their 4 years in college.
1 in 4.
Yeah, 1 in 4. So you have a 25% chance, during your college years of being sexually assaulted. I believe that's a market. And that's just in those college years. 1 in 5 women during their lifetime will be sexually assaulted. I believe the statistic for men is 1 in 6, amongst a very, very high percentage of folks that are in, BIPOC or LGBTQ communities, and even the transgender community, which sees a huge amount of sexual assault happen. It's astounding how much, really occurs. And, a lot of that is under the age of 25, right? And so that's something that is impacting you, kind of as a young person that, for the rest of your life, you kind of have to say, what am I doing moving forward? How is this going to impact me? How is this going to impact future relationships? And even confidence in the workspace, right?
Right. And so Leda Health, I want to fast forward a little bit. I'm going to do a little bit of a ping pong here to try and understand, the founding journey here. What does Leda Health do today?
So right now we're a holistic platform for everything after the sexual assault. So as much as, we want to kind of eventually be in prevention, the first thing that we kind of examined is getting support after a sexual assault can be very difficult. And it can often feel like, you can't trust anybody. You don't know who to trust. You don't know what resources are out there. And so Leda is really building a company around everything, like I said, after the assault. So starting with at-home evidence collection kits, but going into mental health and medical care as well, whether that's offering free STD testing or free Plan B. Basically anything after a sexual assault, we're here for you. And, we want to be that community when you feel like no one else really understands what you're going through.
Right. And so now going back a little bit, the founding of Leda Health, you started with the Me Too kits, right? And can you tell me a little bit about your decision to start a company in this space? What was it immediately after you went through the event, or was it, did this come after a lot of thought?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely wasn't like I was sexually assaulted, then I woke up the next day saying, perfect business opportunity. But it was, years of really examining the trauma that I had gone through, but not just my trauma, in examining, friends of mine's trauma and understanding that what happened to me was not a unique experience. It was something that happened to a lot of other folks. Their stories oftentimes were worse than the story that I went through. And, the one thing that all came together in those stories was, they felt like there was a lack of resources and they felt like there was a lack of community. And even though there are very, traditional resources out there, sometimes schools can offer resources and sometimes nonprofits can offer resources. I was astounded by, the sheer lack of all the survivors that I met not wanting to access those resources for privacy concerns, or not wanting to access them because they couldn't access them in the comfort of their own home via telehealth, right? And so that's kind of what made me want to, build a company around that. I think most founders want to look at a problem statement. And once they see that problem statement, try to build things that can hopefully help that.
Right. And so what was that experience like actually starting a company in this space? What is the reaction that you're getting? How are you bringing people on board? What is the vibe like with the team as you're working on such a meaningful problem?
I mean, I think the team that we have now, we've had lots of people that have come in and out of Leda, whether it's for 3 months or 2 years. We've been around for like 2 years now. I think the vibe of the folks that we work with are, generally people that every single day they want to wake up and they want to talk about this problem and they want to, move the needle forward, even if it's just, a very, very small amount. So I'm really lucky to work with so many people that every day they wake up and say, enough is not enough. We can actually move the needle forward in a really meaningful way.
And when you're starting this company, the reactions of people around you?
Yeah, I mean, I think from survivors, we've always had, really positive reactions because survivors understand, what it's like to be sexually assaulted and what it's like to try to access resources and not be able to. And, we've not always had the best responses from every single party. Mostly it comes out, from a concern perspective for survivors. And I understand that. But the one thing that I consider my North Star is building something that puts survivors first, and not necessarily the institutions which have historically kind of been created to undermine survivors and their wishes.
I see. And so 2 years going strong, what have you learned about this, not industry, but this space in these past 2 years?
I mean, I wouldn't.
Maybe things that surprised you that you didn't realize before.
I wouldn't wish it upon anyone to do the job that I do. It can be very difficult. I think any founder can, have a very difficult, day-to-day life. But I think the things that I noticed is just, the tiredness of it all. Maybe I'm saying that because it's a Monday and I'm already tired, but it can be a lot, right? Things can break and crises can happen, and that can happen with any company. But when it happens to us, we're not just talking about an email browser not working or like a project management software not loading. We're talking about a person who's just gone through the most traumatic moment of their life, not being able to access resources. So I think the stakes are a lot higher. And I think I didn't realize that when I first started the company, is how high the stakes are. And I think that was something that I realized in building the company, and working with my team members. It's just to understand that how, big a mistake, we can make can impact in such a crazy way versus any other company.
And how did you grow, whether personally, professionally, leadership, through this experience of channeling, your personal trauma into something that is going to be helping potentially millions of people around the world?
I think the biggest thing that I've learned is, to never just stop with what you initially thought was possible. When we talk about how we went from Me Too Kids to Leda Health and what we'll eventually expand to, I think in the very beginning, I thought it was only so big what I could build. I think, I could only tackle this very small problem. And I think in, continuously building the company, I realized that no, if you build enough amazing people behind you who have the expertise, you can build something huge that not only will just, tackle sexual assault and, will tackle major societal and cultural healthcare problems.
Right. And so now if you're looking at sexual assault in the United States or the world, what are some things that could really move the needle that you're saying, wow, like there's so much low-hanging fruit here that we need to fix that I can't believe it's not actually happening?
I think when I started the company, I thought what would move the needle forward is reporting. So I thought if more people reported, then that would move the needle on the conversation. But after 2 years of doing this work, I realized that reporting wasn't actually what moves the needle forward on this, on the subject. I think what moves the needle forward is, trying to understand what justice means and why every single sexual assault survivor is going to view justice in a completely different way. Because I think right now,
Interesting.
Yeah, I think the industry in general believes that justice oftentimes can only be achieved through the penal corrective system, of which we've learned from, countless healing circle groups, so support groups with sexual assault survivors, that, the penal corrective system is not what a lot of survivors want. All they want is accountability. They want accountability. They want someone to say that they're sorry. They want someone to say, hey, what I did was wrong, and in fact, that I'm going to do better. And I think that those are the things that, will actually move the forward, is more accountability from those folks that have, caused harm, but not necessarily saying that that accountability has to come through the penal corrective system.
Right. And by the way, in terms of trend, are we doing better as a society? Are we doing worse as a society?
I mean, statistically speaking, the stats haven't moved from like 1 in 4, 1 in 5, or 77% unreported or 90% unreported on colleges. So, I would say that we haven't really moved the needle yet, but as a culture, I think we're getting better at talking about it. I think the Me Too movement did a lot of work in terms of bringing the conversation to the table. I don't think that was enough. I think there's a lot more work that needs to be done. And I'm really looking forward to Leda kind of being at the forefront of a lot of those discussions on how do we continue to move the needle forward, and not just from the conversations that happened back in 2017 and 2018.
Right. And that makes a lot of sense. And, if you're thinking now about a lot of people that are going through different traumatic events, and, we started the conversation with you mentioning how there's different ways of approaching it. You can decide to go to therapy. You can decide to close in. You can decide to go and try to do something outward. If you had to look back and talk to yourself, whether it's after the traumatic event or when you're thinking of how to deal with it, what advice would you give your sort of younger self in retrospect?
I think I would have first told myself to, if it wasn't me keeping the evidence of what had happened that night, giving someone else that evidence. So if in years to come I wanted to look back on it, I could have. I think something that I regret every single day is, having deleted photos, having deleted text messages, because it was too traumatic for me to deal with. And I wish that I would have given that to somebody, so they could hold it on for safekeeping. So even 5, 10 years later, I could have, kind of looked at that and started that healing process. But I think the other thing that I would have wanted to tell my younger self is, it wasn't your fault, which I think is the first thing that you start to think about after an assault or any traumatic event, is that I caused this. And I think that can be very harmful, is to, constantly as a society tell ourselves that it is our fault for the way that we were treated, when in fact it wasn't our fault. And so that, I think, has been like the biggest learning, of myself and like a lot of other of our team members as well, is that it wasn't our fault, what had happened to us. And I think that that's a really big, thing to consider.
Right. And so, tangibly, people go through these experiences. It's not always clear that they're able to sit down and
Yeah.
reflect and say, okay, how can I, make the most out of the situation and then go help other people? So what did you do that worked for you as you were trying to very also objectively think through how can I actually go and make a positive impact, even though this is a subject that is so, that is so personal to me?
I think just because I've decided to, devote a lot of my life towards making a positive impact for my trauma, I think it's also very important, to talk about the fact that it doesn't have to define you, what had happened to you. And so, every single day I tell my story about my sexual assault, 5 to 10 times a day. That doesn't have to be a reality for every survivor. They don't have to turn that trauma into a business or turn it into volunteering or doing anything. But I think it was something that I needed to do as a personal healing mechanism for me, and as what I wanted to see as justice. And I think this goes back to how do we really move the needle forward? And I think it's coming to that realization of, what does justice mean for you? And just because justice meant for me starting this company doesn't mean that that's going to mean that for every survivor. Probably not many survivors. And just realizing that, trying to find that North Star and come to the realization of, what do I need to move on and what do I need to begin healing, is incredibly important.
Wonderful. Madison, I really want to thank you for coming and for sharing with me, your insights and your journey. I have just 3 short questions, a little bit about you. And I want to take you back to your childhood. And what really fascinated you while you were a kid, whether it was a subject in school or a passion? What fascinated you really?
So I was really into entertainment. So I thought I wanted to be a dancer or a singer or an actress, or, something in entertainment. That was my passion. And every single day I even went to a conservatory, whenever I was like 15. I went to a performing arts high school. So that was something that was, I've been really passionate since the age of 5. And I think it's actually really good for business. I highly recommend to folks, the best thing that they could possibly do is take an improv class, because, you're going to be in meetings with investors where they're going to ask you questions on the fly, and they might be very difficult questions. And you're going to have to figure out how to respond to those. And I think, being an improv and being able to understand people's emotions, how to feed off of those emotions and answer questions even when you're stressed, and under pressure, with the proverbial stage lights on you where you have to perform, I think is an incredibly good skill that I learned.
Amazing. And where do you derive inspiration from today?
Um, I think my team. So I think the most important thing that you can possibly do is build a team that every single day they inspire you to wake up and continue doing the work that you're doing. And as much as, myself and my co-founder inspire each other to wake up every day and keep fighting this problem, I think it's my team who have all experienced trauma, who can see it working and can see us moving the needle, that inspire me even on days where I feel tired and I don't want to get out of bed, to know that there is, folks basically waiting, right, to be inspired by me and to be led by me to continue building what we're building.
Definitely. And 3 words that you would use to describe yourself.
Sarcastic, ambitious, and I'll use the word that I feel right now, which is tired. So I think ambition and tired can go together, because highly ambitious people can still, be tired at what, in the middle of the day, even though they've been pushing all morning. So
Definitely. Madison, thank you very, very much. I really appreciate you taking the time to come and share your journey. And best of luck with Leda Health, and stay safe and stay healthy.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me.